My neighbor and I get along very well. We greet each other whenever we run into each other, and sometimes we even end up at the same supermarket without planning it. Occasionally, we take turns paying for each other's groceries, and from time to time we share food. In the afternoons, I usually go out for a walk. My neighbor has a window that looks directly into her kitchen. One day, while I was walking past, I didn't see her inside, so I assumed she was sleeping. That day I decided to walk farther than usual. I really felt like walking for a long time, and eventually I ended up eating some fast food at a park before heading back home. When I finally returned, it was around midnight. Normally I get back around 8 p.m. As I approached my house, I saw my neighbor through her kitchen window. She was cooking meat. Something about it looked strange. Then she suddenly turned around and noticed me. She seemed startled, but I assumed it was because I had come back so late. We greeted each other as usual, and I went inside my house. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about that meat. I searched online, trying to find something similar, but nothing matched. Eventually I went to sleep. The next day I followed my normal routine, but this time I had a different idea. I wanted to come back late on purpose to see what she was cooking again. Part of me even wondered if she might be preparing something to share. When I returned that night, she was cooking the same type of meat again. She opened the refrigerator while she was distracted, and that's when I saw it more clearly. I froze. There was no way that kind of meat was normal. I didn't fully understand what I was seeing, but something about it felt completely wrong. When I got back inside my house, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Questions kept running through my mind. Why would she cook something like that? Was I the first neighbor to notice? Or had someone else discovered it before me? I was terrified of going outside again that night, but I felt like it was the only way to find answers. If I asked her directly, she would know something was wrong. That night I decided to sleep and investigate the next day. The following morning I went to the park and stayed out longer than usual. I didn't want to return home until it was late enough that she would probably be asleep. Eventually, it was almost 3 a.m. It was time. I took my phone to photograph anything important and a small flashlight so I wouldn't make too much light. Using a small piece of metal, I carefully opened her door. It worked. When I entered the house, I immediately saw the meat in the kitchen again. I avoided looking at it for too long. I opened the main refrigerator. Everything there looked completely normal. I kept searching, but the house looked exactly the same as always. Nothing seemed out of place. I didn't want to go upstairs because that's where she slept. There had to be something different somewhere. That's when I noticed a hidden door behind some furniture. It was locked with chains and a padlock. Using the same small metal tool, I managed to open it. I gently placed the lock on the floor and slowly opened the door. Cold air came from below. It looked like an old basement that hadn't been maintained in a long time. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed a strong, unpleasant smell. At the bottom, there were hanging chains, a refrigerator, and several tools. At first glance, everything looked ordinary, but the atmosphere felt wrong. I opened the basement refrigerator. That's where she was getting what she cooked in the kitchen. While looking around, I noticed another door with a lock. Just as I was about to open it, I heard movement upstairs. She had woken up. I quickly closed the basement door from the inside and hid. Moments later, she entered and walked downstairs. She opened the refrigerator and took something from it. I stayed perfectly still. My hiding spot was good, it seemed like a place she never checked. Then she spoke. What she said left me frozen, my heart pounding faster than ever. I had looked forward to it so much, the French countryside, the food, a real farm. I'd been practicing French since I started dating Nicholas, but as our trip grew nearer, I practiced with renewed fervor. Finally, we were here. Everything exceeded expectations: Paris, the train rides, and now, the farm. Nicholas acted worldly, though he mellowed as we approached his grandparents' town. The fields looked like postcards. Late that afternoon, Grandpère took us on a tour. The setting sun hit the lush gardens just right, turning the leaves to jade. Grandpère grunted. "You won't get flavors like these in America. Only McDonald's there." His accent was heavy. Despite my efforts, I only caught the rough sense of his words. Nicholas suppressed an eye roll, wanting to remind him we lived in Canada. It was a timeless dance from Nicholas's childhood summers, Grandpère bashing foreigners and Nicholas counting the days until he could leave. Holding hands, we followed Grandpère into the stone farmhouse. A feast of pot au feu, crusty baguettes, and red wine awaited us. But Grandpère was angry. As we spread bone marrow on bread, he ranted about government subsidies. Nicholas frowned, struggling with the farming jargon. "We will show them, our tractors blocked the country last year, we need more fertilizer, du sang noir, traders in Paris telling us what to use, only 100 kilos this year, are you kidding me? Just my leeks need 45 kilos d'engrais noir, I can't miss the season." My brain twitched. In careful English, Grandmère asked, "Are you sure you drink wine?" I nodded. She looked at Nicholas. "She drinks wine?" she asked in French. Nicholas poured me a glass, and I took a huge, grateful sip. Grandmère looked scandalized. I realized why Nicholas had insisted we stay only one night. Grandpère stopped ranting and turned to me. Unable to bear his blue gaze, I looked at my plate. He reached out a work-worn hand and touched my cheek. I flinched, it felt like a strike. "Assez noir," he smiled. My eyes widened with fear. "Assez what now?" I looked at Nicholas in a panic. He glanced at Grandmère, who was loudly chewing gristle. "Can we go to our room?" he asked in English. Grandmère jolted. "Of course, mes petits. All that travel." She showed us to Nicholas's old room and left with a smile. We sat on the bed in silence, discombobulated by the comments. Later, we went back downstairs to fetch our suitcases, assuming they were asleep. A scraping sound wafted up. Scrape. Scrape. A dim light spilled from the kitchen. We saw Grandpère sharpening a knife. Without a word, we dashed back up, grabbed our backpacks, and slid into the hallway. He was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "Leave her, Nicholas. We need the blood. For the farm, it needs dark blood." Suddenly, a switch turned on. I understood him perfectly. He took a step up. Nicholas moved in front of me as we clattered toward him. I screamed as hands shoved me from behind. I fell toward the knife. Twisting, I saw Grandmère above me. She didn't follow us down. Nicholas swung his backpack as I fell against him. Grandpère grunted as it caught his head. As he stumbled, Nicholas swung again. We dashed past him to the door. Fiddling with the heavy lock took an eternity. Grandpère lunged, I deflected him with my bag. Finally, Nicholas shoved the door open. We ran into the dark, the air heavy with the scent of flourishing vegetables. I looked back. The silhouettes of Grandpère and Grandmère stood in the doorway, still as a painting. They didn't chase us. They just watched as we ran toward the town. This story came from Matteo. I had just moved into a small two-bedroom house on the edge of town. It wasn't in a bad neighborhood, just older. The kind of place where the streetlights flicker and most of the houses have chain-link fences and squeaky gates. I liked it because it was quiet. After years of apartment living, I wanted space. Privacy. Somewhere that actually felt like mine. The first week was completely normal. The second week is when the door started unlocking. The first time it happened, I blamed myself. I came home from work around 6 p.m., groceries in my arms, and noticed the front door wasn't fully shut. It was slightly cracked open, just enough for a thin line of darkness to show between the frame and the wood. My stomach dropped for a second, but then I convinced myself I must have been in a rush that morning. I clearly remembered locking it though. I even have a habit of checking the knob twice. Still, nothing inside looked disturbed. TV where I left it. Laptop on the desk. Bedroom untouched. I brushed it off. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, I was certain I had locked it. I stood there for a full 10 seconds that morning, pulling on the handle to make sure. I remember thinking, good. Locked. When I came home, the door wasn't wide open. It was unlocked. Closed. But unlocked. I tested it slowly, half expecting it to swing inward on its own. It didn't. But the knob turned without resistance. I walked in carefully, heart pounding. Every shadow in the hallway looked wrong. I checked the closets. Under the bed. Shower curtain. Nothing. But something felt off. It wasn't that things were missing. It was that things felt touched. My kitchen chair was slightly angled away from the table. My bedroom window was cracked open an inch. I never opened that window. That night, I barely slept. I told myself maybe the lock was faulty. It was an older house. Maybe the mechanism slipped. So the next day, I bought a brand new deadbolt from the hardware store. Installed it myself. Tested it 5 times before leaving for work. Locked. Solid. No wiggle. When I got home that evening, my blood ran cold before I even reached the door. The porch light was on. I never leave the porch light on. I walked up slowly, almost hoping I'd see someone running away, just so I'd know I wasn't losing my mind. The new deadbolt was unlocked. I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, staring at the lock like it had personally betrayed me. There were no signs of forced entry. No scratches. No broken frame. Nothing. Someone had unlocked it properly. That's when I called the police. They came, checked the house, asked if anyone else had a key. I told them no. The previous owner? I didn't know. Maybe. The officer suggested I talk to the realtor or the landlord who had managed the property before it was sold. Before they left, one of the officers said something that stuck with me. Sometimes people make copies of keys before moving out. That thought burrowed into my brain. That night, I wedged a chair under the doorknob and stayed awake on the couch with the TV on low volume. Around 2:13 a.m., I heard it. The softest sound. The faint metallic click of a key entering a lock. My entire body went rigid. Slowly, carefully, the doorknob began to turn. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as pressure pushed against the door from outside. Whoever it was didn't expect resistance. There was a pause. Then another attempt. Slower this time. The deadbolt held. My breathing was so loud I was scared they could hear it through the door. After about 15 seconds, the knob stopped moving. Footsteps moved across my porch. Then silence. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I quietly crawled toward the window and peeked through the blinds just enough to see outside. There was a car parked across the street. Engine off. Headlights off. As I watched, the interior light flicked on briefly. Someone was inside. Watching the house. The car didn't leave until 3:07 a.m. The next morning, I checked the lock. There were fresh scratch marks around the keyhole. Tiny, but visible. Someone had been trying to use a key that didn't quite fit anymore. I changed every lock in the house that day. Added a chain. Installed a cheap security camera facing the front porch. 2 nights later, I got the notification. Motion detected, front door. The footage showed a man in a dark hoodie standing on my porch at 1:58 a.m. He didn't knock. He didn't try the handle. He just stood there, staring directly into the door, like he knew I was on the other side. After about 30 seconds, he leaned forward slightly and whispered something. The camera didn't record audio, but I could read his lips clearly enough. "Why did you change it?" "I moved out 2 weeks later." I never found out who he was. But sometimes, when I think about it, I realize something worse. He wasn't trying to get in. He already had been.